们讲最新的骨髓瘤的信息。
So just to continue with what Joanne said, thanks for that. Actually, I felt that there was a bit of tingling sensation in my body. Is it normal? Now I just wanted to tell you that the business of talking to doctors is very important, and I think especially in diseases like myeloma. Now there are some diseases where you don't get any time to react because it's so acute and you're so ill that you just have to take whatever is given. So for example, if you have acute leukemia, there's no choice. You have to be hospitalized, you have to have strong treatment, you have to take whatever is given. Whereas, countries such as myeloma, where it's not like that at all, you get treatment that is light, and you can go home. You get a lot of time to think. So that is where I think having unanswered questions is more important. When you're very sick, you don't have any time to think. You just are sick. But if you're well, then you have time in the world, all the time in the world to think. So, so I think having a notepad or smartphone or whatever, recording things is very important because there's a lot of information. So, I just wanted to say that it's even more important in diseases where the treatment is long drawn out, as opposed to say leukemia where the treatment is short and sharp. So, on that. Today I will talk a little bit about what has changed with myeloma, not just treatment, but also on what has happened to how we call myeloma. It's gone through a lot of change over many years. I'll talk a little bit about the drugs available in Singapore and approved, and also some update on drugs which are in development but not approved yet. So up until last year, the way myeloma was diagnosed was basically devised back in 2002. Even that was based on changes from the time before that. So, as I told you, most patients with myeloma would go through a phase of MGUS, smoldering myeloma, and active myeloma. Now, the risk of MGUS going into myeloma is annually 1%, which means that if you're 50 years old, if you have MGUS, by age of 70, your chance of becoming myeloma is about 20% because you are 20 years later. Smoldering myeloma, risk of progression to myeloma is slightly higher. For the first 5 years, the risk is about 10%. And after that, it's about 3%. And after that, it goes right low. So the highest risk is in the first few years after diagnosis of smoldering myeloma. So the risk goes up as we go from MGUS to smoldering and to myeloma. And for calling somebody with myeloma, you really needed to have, what we see there, CRAB. That's a CRAB. It's a short form for combination of bone damage caused by myeloma. So if there's any proof that this cancer has caused damage to your body, it needs treatment. That is the bottom line. So even if we can't see the cancers being very high in the body, if you can say that the damage has been caused by the cancer, it needs treatment, and that wasn't the only thing needed to call it myeloma. Now we needed to show that there were some plasma cells, which are the cancer cells in the bone marrow, and we also had the M band in the blood. So if we had all those, we could call it myeloma. Now, it's not very black and white in real life, and we have many patients who are, just before, in the state before myeloma, and we think that they are not doing very well. So on paper, they are not myeloma, but they are not behaving like that. So this problem has been brewing for a long while. And last year, towards the end, there was a new update that came out. And what they found was that there is a group of people who have a very high chance of progression to myeloma, about 40% per year. That means that in the 2 years, the chance of going to myeloma is about 80%. And these are people who have some changes which are not really, we can't call them as myeloma yet, but these are people with very high chance of going into myeloma in the next 2 years. So these are people with MRI scan showing bone damage. So right now, we use X-ray for picking up myeloma problem. So X-ray has a problem that X-ray will be normal up to 50% of bone till 50% of bone disappears. So it's not a very useful test. It's very low sensitivity test. So if your bones are not damaged up to 50%, that's will be normal. Whereas MRI can pick up this damage very early. So they found that if you have an MRI change with what we call focal lesion, which is basically a hole in the bone, more than 5 millimeter, at least 2, then that is a risk of, very high risk of progression to myeloma in the next 2 years. So they said that these people, although they are not myeloma, they are going to get myeloma in the next 2 years, and these people should be treated as myeloma now, because if you treat them now, maybe you can avoid damage of the organs earlier. The second group was people with very high number of cancer cells in the bone marrow. So if you do bone marrow biopsy, and if you have like more than 60% cancer cells in the bone marrow, even if they are well, they are at very high risk of progression to myeloma. So that was the second group of people. And the third group was people when they had very abnormal free light chain. So there is some patients who don't have a full M band in the blood, or they only have light chain myeloma. And there are some people who have both M band and light chain in the blood. So if the ratio of the normal versus the abnormal shows that the abnormal is about 100 times higher than the normal, which means that there's a very high level of the abnormal protein. That's also another condition which puts you at very high risk of developing into myeloma in the next 2 years. So the specialists around the world feel that maybe these people should be starting treatment early so that the damage can be prevented. So now we have started looking for people. When a new patient comes, we look for these things to see whether they fit into any of these criteria. Now, we don't know whether, so as of now in 2014, the criteria has been changed now to include the 3 new features in the bottom. So if you have high number of cancer cells, about 60%, if you have abnormal free light chain ratio, or if you have more than 1 focal lesion, so that makes it 2 focal lesions in MRI. So we do MRI of the whole spine from the neck up to the bottom and also pelvis. So these are the highest risk areas for people. So some hospitals have whole body MRI, but it's a very long process because MRI takes a long time. So what we do is to make it one step lower. So we go for a whole spine and the pelvis. If you have any lesions, more than 2 in the spine or in the pelvis, that's also another high risk for myeloma. And the CRAB stands for high calcium, kidney problem, anemia or low blood or bone disease. So if you have any of those, then you already have myeloma. But if you don't have any of the top, if you have any of the bottom new biomarkers, then you're also considered to have myeloma. If you don't have any of those criteria, then you're probably going to be in either MGUS or smoldering myeloma. Right now, there isn't very strong indication to treat people in surely MGUS. There's no evidence at all to treat people. So if anybody has MGUS, we'll be more than happy to see them once in 3 to 6 months. Smoldering myeloma, also not really, because we don't know whether treating them will actually make them worse or better, because most people with smoldering myeloma don't have any symptoms. So you start giving them treatment, they actually feel sick because of the treatment, not because of the disease. So people's mindset change when they are really sick. So that's very important. What we have found is that if you're leukemia very sick, you will take whatever treatment is given. But if you're well, I come and tell you, why do we start treatment? Nobody will take it because I'm not feeling sick. Why should I have treatment? And that's a relevant and important thing. So I think that smoldering myeloma right now doesn't need treatment. Whereas people with the high-risk features may be developing myeloma in the next 2 years. Again, hard to convince patients sometimes because we tell them, actually you're okay now, but the risk of developing it is very high in 2 years. Some people feel anxious enough to start treatment, some people don't. Okay? And I don't have data, studies to say that starting treatment early makes it better. And this is all based on faith and best evidence to say that maybe starting treatment better is good for you. But there is no evidence to say that. Okay? So maybe in the next 10 years we'll be able to show that. But right now, it again depends on discussion with who's in front of you. So what does it mean to you? I think that we have what the hope is that if you start treatment early for people with a very high risk of progression to myeloma, we can prevent organ damage. I'm not entirely convinced that I would give treatment to these people. Partly because I feel that I don't have the evidence to support it. So that's where I would discuss all these things with the patient and see what they believe, and if they also agree with me, and then we go ahead. So it's a discussion and a decision based on input from both sides, and it's not a unilateral thing, and it never works. We'll talk about the approved drugs which are available. Okay, I don't know what it's a. So this is on the top, the name of the drug, carfilzomib. Okay, so if you Google for a drug called Kyprolis, 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 that is what it is. Okay, and the picture here shows. I'll explain to you what it is. So in our cells, we have a system of getting rid of cellular junk, which means that if there is a lot of toxic chemicals inside the cells will die because it's basically junk. So there is a system of digesting the proteins and excreting out of the cell so that the cells are clean. Okay, and this is called the proteasome system. Right up there, the bin, you see that proteins go in there, they get digested into smaller particles, and the cells go out, and the proteins are excreted from the cell. Now this is very important for the cells not to die. Okay, and now myeloma. In myeloma, you have protein called M-band being made in your cells, and this M-band is basically a lot of protein. Okay, so what was discovered was that if you can shut down the system of the recycling bin, okay, the cells will have a lot of protein inside your cells, and basically they will die because of a lot of the amount of junk inside the cell. So Velcade does precisely that. It shuts down the proteasome system, and the cells accumulate a lot of protein inside the cell, and the cells die. Carfilzomib, again a similar drug, it does the same thing, but works slightly differently. But it also does the same thing. It messes with the recycling system inside the cell. It messes with the junk bin, and the cells get a lot of toxic stuff, and the cells die. So key points. Velcade is given as an injection under the skin. Most people don't have a problem with it. It's given once a week. This drug is given at the moment 2 times a week, and it's given day 1, day 2, day 8, day 9, day 15, 16. That is 2 days in a week for 3 weeks on a row. And then after that there's rest. So that's how the cycle goes. So, and it's an injection, not an injection under the skin, it's a drip. Okay. So it's a bit more cumbersome for patients because they have to come twice a week rather than once a week. It's approved for patients patients with myeloma, relapsed myeloma, after 2 lines of treatment. So if you only had 1 line of treatment and relapse, it's not approved right now. So the approved indication is only for myeloma that's coming back after being treated twice. It's a very well tolerated drug. We've had this treatment and this drug in clinical trial in Singapore for about 2 years. I've treated about 10 patients or so on this drug before my own clinical study. And it's a drug. The only problem with it is that you have to come very often to see us. It's twice a week, and that's sometimes quite difficult for patients. But beyond that, the drug is very well tolerated. The first cycle can be a bit challenging because we don't know how they're going to respond. So sometimes they have breathing trouble, some kidney problem, etc. But after that kind of period, most people are able to tolerate it very well. And the side effects are actually very, very minimal, I would say. So it's a drug that if they can improve the frequency of injection, would be a good drug. Because twice a week might be a bit challenging. They are currently doing studies of injecting once a week, but we don't have data on that. But I think maybe in 2 years' time we'll have data on that, injecting once a week. Very less often, less than 10% people can get heart problems and liver problems. So monitoring all these things are very important. So most people who are on this drug, we will do an echocardiogram, heart scan, liver tests, and look for any symptoms. Actually, there are people in this room who've had it for 2 years now. So if there are any different opinion, you can tell after that. So it's safe in people with poor kidney function. So is Velcade. It's safe in people with poor kidney function, and it's effective in patients who have failed lenalidomide and Velcade. So that's where the indication is. Currently, if you have to get it, I have to write to HSA and I have to write to a company in the US to import it. It takes about 4 weeks to get it. So that's the only problem. So when you really need it, you can't get it because it takes 4 weeks to get it. So you need to have a bit of planning involved. So if you think somebody's going to need it, I need to apply for it straight away because there is that time 4 weeks. We have it in clinical trial for newly diagnosed myeloma. So the study is now running between us and NUH. And if you have myeloma diagnosed for the first time, you can get it. You can get it up to 2 years even after completing treatment if you have signs of myeloma. So I'm hoping that in the next 2 years we'll have more data on carfilzomib from Singapore. The second medicine is pomalidomide. It's a third generation drug in the thalidomide family. So the first drug that came out in the first graph I showed you in 1990s was thalidomide, very old drug which was used for stopping vomiting in pregnant females in the 50s. So it was a very good drug for stopping vomiting, but what happened was that it caused a lot of problems to newborn babies. They were born without limbs, the company had to pay a whole, big lawsuit in the US for that. Lenalidomide is a modification of that, and it doesn't have that problem. Although there's strict control on not getting pregnant or impregnating somebody else when you're taking this medicine. So you have to be having barrier conception when you're taking lenalidomide. There is the same thing applies to Revlimid also. It's a similar drug, but it's a newer generation. Pomalidomide, Pomalyst, is stronger than lenalidomide in terms of affinity for cancer cells, and it's approved for people who have failed both lenalidomide and Velcade. So it's again a good drug, and the side effects are somewhat similar to lenalidomide. It's very well tolerated. It's a tablet that you take, and the commonest side effect are lowering of blood counts. So the beauty of lenalidomide is that it's a tablet that everybody loves because it's a tablet after all. You can take it, you can go home, and you come back in a month's time to see a doctor. You don't want to come and see them very often. The same applies to pomalidomide too. It's a tablet, and it's to be taken in a similar way. You take it for 3 weeks, one tablet a day for 3 weeks and 1 week rest. Again, in Singapore, we can't get it right away because we need to apply for it. So this is because HSA, our local regulatory agency, have not approved the drugs yet. So we are generally about a year to 2 years behind FDA, which is a US regulatory agency in approving drugs. So I know that both pomalidomide and carfilzomib have applied to Singapore. So I think the process is in motion. So it will take a few months for that to be approved. So in about 6 months' time, we should be able to get it just as good as I can get lenalidomide. Means if I prescribe it today, I can get it today. But right now, there is another waiting time of about 3 to 4 weeks for this too. But there is a study that we are running now in Singapore where you can get this drug as part of clinical trial for patients who have failed lenalidomide and previously have had Velcade. So this study again will pay for pomalidomide, and if you are experiencing myeloma coming back after having had both the drugs, you can get it for free. So this study is a part of the study that we are doing with Asian Myeloma Network, and people from Korea, Thailand, and Singapore and Hong Kong are participating in the study. So these are the 2 studies I mentioned as examples of how we are trying to do things ourselves, because the problem that we have in Singapore is that we are a small country and we have restriction in the number of patients that we can recruit. So when a big pharma company looks for a place to run a clinical trial, Asian countries, Singapore doesn't work very well because it's a small country. They would much rather go to Korea or Japan, where the recruitment can be very fast, big country, many hospitals. So they are okay to run phase 1, phase 2 studies. When it comes to phase 3, it's a bit of a draw of luck, and it's not to our happiness. So that's why we've been trying to push for our own studies. And the benefit for pharma companies in doing our own study is that it's cheaper for them, because when it comes from the pharma companies, they have to pay everything that is included in the study. You've seen doctor doing blood tests, everything. Whereas if I propose a study, then many times we are just asked for the medicine, the main medicine. The rest of the things have to be paid for by the patient, because that's how, if I ask for a lot of money, they will clearly turn me down. And this applies to any country. So that's why we've been proposing such studies to companies, and we've been successful, and we have more in plan. So I'm hoping that in the next 2-3 years, or or longer than that, we'll be in a good position to after showing them that we can do studies very well, be able to bring such things in. So it's a bit of trust building also involved here. The last drug that got approved was panobinostat. again, there are some patients here who may have had panavinostat before here. So this was approved in early 2015. There was a study called Panorama. I don't know if any of you have participated in that study. It's a new class of drug for myeloma. It's called HDAC inhibitor. Panavinostat is the first drug in that class to be approved for myeloma. And it's again a tablet, but experience with it has been a bit challenging. So the drug works, you know that when it's given together with Velcade it works, but it can be very taxing for patients because diarrhea is quite a problem. So we're trying to figure out how to improve the diarrhea and the fatigue that goes with the tablet. It works, but most people have myeloma coming back a year or so after stopping treatment. So we are trying to figure out, we are trying to propose a study where we are looking at more Asian patients. We see that, Chinese and Indians and Malays don't do as well as Caucasians when it comes to clinical studies. So the side effects and the dosage needed are a lot of, often lesser in terms of, we only need a smaller amount to have kind of benefit. And we have more side effects also. So it seems like most of the studies are US-centric or Europe-centric, and they don't have a lot of data on Asian patients. So we cannot extend studies which were done in the sort of Western population to our population directly. So we're trying. That's another reason why companies are now more interested in looking at Asia, because they want to have more Chinese and Indians and Malays as their population to see what's happening to them. So overall, I think there is some learning and some learning for both patient and us in terms of what we can do and how we can improve it. So in Singapore, we can get it for compassionate basis, which means that if I believe that a patient can benefit from it, I can ask for this drug to be given, and it will be again free, because when you look for, when a drug is on compassionate basis, they want data on the patient. So they want the information on how well the patient is doing, whether there's any side effects, etc. So it's somewhat similar, but again gives us access to these drugs. So that brings us to, there are a lot more in preparation, and I don't think it's a good idea to talk about all these things, because many of this, the chance of failure of drugs coming into market is about 90%. So there are so many drugs in early clinical phases that only 10% of them really come out finally. So as I talk, there are many drugs out there which are in different stages of clinical trial, and I don't want to talk about them. I'll talk about 2 or 3 which are promising and sort of a new trend in not just myeloma but in all diseases. So the first one is oral Velcade. I'll just call it oral Velcade for ease of understanding. It means that it's a tablet form of the Velcade. Not really Velcade itself, but it's made by a different company. But in principle, it's the same kind of drug, but given as a tablet. So there are 2 in preparation. One is called ixazomib, the other one is called oprosamib. Don't look at the names; they're very confusing. Okay? Opro means this oral proteasome inhibitor. How they name it is completely, it's up to them. The name carfilzomib came around because of the 2 scientists who were involved. One was Carla, the other one was Phil. So they put it together to make it carfilzomib. So there was another drug in myeloma called dasatinib, okay? And the name came to existence because the guy who has discovered it was called Das. He's an Indian doctor who was working in the US, so it was named after him, dasatinib. Okay, so how the name comes on, nobody has a clue. But but when it come up, hopefully they'll have a nice name, that we can spell. So these drugs are not approved, but in 5 years' time, I think one of them will be in market, and I think ixazomib is leading in terms of investigation. So I think it's in phase 2 and phase 3 studies, and it brings the promise of no injection treatment, and I think that is very important because myeloma, as you see, is where most of the people now live beyond 5 years, and they can't be asked to have injection regularly, and it will improve quality of life tremendously to have tablets. So I think that is one attraction. But there are challenges because the studies have shown that, again, there are more side effects to tablets. They cause more diarrhea, not as effective. So injections are more effective still. So I think we need to tailor and learn more about these drugs. The second one is this drug called daratumumab. Okay, what I've shown here is So this is my drawing of plasma cancer cell. Okay, they are not the best, but I guess it's not bad. So what I see there, like the two eyeballs are the cancer cells. Okay, and what you see on top of the thing like a Y are antigens expressed by cancer cells called CD38. And this is a typical antigen expressed by a plasma cell, which is what myeloma is made of. So what they did was to take out this molecules and inject into the poor lab rat. Okay, and they developed the rat made antibodies. So they took out the antibodies, and so the antibodies are basically designed to look at cells and see whether any of these things are there. If they are there, they go and attack them. And what happens after that is that the antibodies go and sit on the antigen, and it triggers a kind of process inside, and basically ending up with the cell being dead. Okay, and this is a new trend for myeloma. It has been in existence for lymphoma for the last 10-15 years. There was a drug called rituximab that came around in the 90s, which changed the way lymphoma has been treated. But it took about 20 years for this to come to myeloma. Okay, and again, I'm sad to say we don't have it in Singapore, not even in clinical trial. And this is one compound that we tried very hard to get, but we couldn't because of, again, I think numbers. Singapore doesn't work very well in terms of numbers. So I think this is where, again, we're trying to get this in a separate clinical study. So this is a new concept for myeloma. All this time, we've never had antibodies for treatment of myeloma. So, and there is more and more data coming out every year of this drug, and the different kind of other companies also in the same rat race. So there are at least 2 or 3 compounds made by different companies in that rate, to get into that space. So again, these are injections. Okay, so they are also likely to cause side effects which are different to what we are used to now, because these are antibodies and they can cause allergic reaction. Okay, so it's very important to monitor the patients very closely, look for allergic reaction. So there's another learning exercise for us there. So we cannot just start using the drug without having experience of using it. So, but I feel that again in the next 5 years we'll have this thing. So there are at least 2 or 3 good drugs out there, which I think will be key to treatment, a bit like lenalidomide now. So in the few years to come, I think we'll be in a much better position. So what are the challenges we have? It's good to have a lot of good drugs which are approved, and the ones which are going to be approved. But the problem is that all these drugs are very costly. Okay, so all these drugs, companies put billions and billions into developing a drug, and they will want the money back when the drug's out in the market. So we have no idea, and no regulatory authority has any control on what price they put. Okay? So in US, the cost of treatment is ridiculously high, and I think it would be a problem for us. So I think in 5 years' time, we'll be looking at cost of treatment about $250,000 a year for treatment of myeloma, and that kind of money is not sustainable. So we need to have new ways of making use of all these drugs in the right way. So I think we need to study how to best make use of these drugs. We cannot just anyhow put everything together, give you the best combination. I can give you a treatment that costs $50,000 a month, no problem. Put an antibody in, put lenalidomide, put Velcade, everything inside, easily make it 50,000. But does it do anything? I mean, is it long-term sustainable? Clearly not. So I think we need to learn a lot about how we can make it cost-effective. Because if you have insurance, that's fine, but not everybody has insurance, and if you are completely dependent on medical social worker, that's also fine. Really not fine, because it's completely wiping out the resources that we have. I think the sandwich class will really suffer if you don't have any kind of insurance for this. And that's why we are very keen to bring in clinical trials, because clinical trials is one easy way to get all these drugs in and don't have without paying for it. Okay. Of course, the downside is that once the study completes, then there is no free drug. But at least it can serve a purpose of treating when the patient needs it then. So I think with all the good drugs come a lot of challenges, and I think we are yet to learn how to best make use of them. And the other question is, now that we've had all these flashy new drugs, should we forget about older medicines? I don't think so. I think, old is gold, but use, old is there. I think we need to make use of it properly. And there are many, so the other story behind this is that if you look at how a cancer cell behaves or in a patient, you can see that, when you say you've got, say 10 million cancer cells in your body, for example, all the 10 million, for example, they are not the same kind of cell. There are many smaller clones which have got slightly different kind of mutations driving them. So it's like a mixture of cells with different kind of properties. Okay? So every time you treat cancer, some of them will escape because they have resistance mechanism. And these are the ones that become prominent the next time. Okay? And this is called the research clones coming up, clonal tiding. So what happens is that newer and newer kind of smaller clones get bigger, and when you treat them, some other clones come out. And this is one reason why myeloma is not a curable disease, because there are many subclones. So what happens is that you may have treated somebody with a good drug in the beginning, but when it comes to third line, that drug is no longer effective, actually, because there's newer drug, for example. But what also means is that maybe two lines down, because of the drug you use here, it's a selective pressure. So when you use a particular drug, it will kill cells that are sensitive to that drug, but it will help the cells which are resistant to grow. So 2 or 3 generations down, we can go back to the same old drug, the one we started at the beginning, because the cells might be sensitive. So what I have found here myself is that, I have patients who've had myeloma for 10, 15 years. And, I'm scratching my head, what to do. And sometimes the patient actually tells me what to do. That's the thing about it, because when you have your disease for 10 years, actually patients are a good source for, telling us what to do. And I have no shame in admitting to that. Okay? It might be because they have, financial issues, or they felt that, okay, that treatment worked for me because I felt an improvement. So sometimes they've told me, can I try that same drug which you had many years ago? And I've done that, and, contrary to my expectation, it has worked. So, so what I'm trying to say is that, regardless of having 100 options, I think you're good.